To Kill a Mockingbird by Harper was published in 1960 and is one of the most famous novels of the American literature. The success of the book was enormous, so much so that it was translated into more than 40 languages and sold more than 30 million copies worldwide. Lee was born in 1926 in the American town of Mooreville, Alabama, where she lived with her parents and her siblings. In her youth, she developed a passion for the English literature and spent most of their time reading and writing. After high school, she began to study law at the University of Alabama. But she realized her real passion was that of writing. So, just a few months before graduation and after almost 4 years, she decided to drop out of school and move to New York to follow her dream. In 1958, she finished her book, which was published 2 years later by the publishing house Lippincott. Thanks to the enormous success, Lee won the prestigious Pulitzer Prize just a year later. In 1962, Robert Mulligan decided to create a film, which, to quote former President Barack Obama, instantly conquered the nation. In the following years, Lee spent her time between New York and her hometown. She tried to avoid the limelight, and one of her few public appearances dates back to 2007, when she was awarded the Presidential Medal of Liberty by President George W. Bush. Harper Lee died in her home in 2016, but her book keeps her alive. The novel is set during the years of the Great Depression in Macomb, a fictional town in Alabama. The story takes place between 1932 and 1935 and is told by Jean Louise Finch, a 6-year-old girl who is known by everyone as Scout. Jean Louise lives in Macomb with her older brother Jem and her father Atticus, a lawyer. One day Dil, the niece of one of their neighbors, arrives in town for the holidays. The children become friends at once and spend their days reading, acting, and spy on the Red Lace, their mysterious neighbors. There are many rumors about them, and in particular about their son Boo. It is said that he has mental problems and that he even tried to kill his father. Boo never leaves his house, but the children want to see him with their own eyes, so they constantly approach his house. In Macomb, time passes quietly, and all the days seem to be the same, with precise habits and recurring schedules. However, all this changes when Atticus Finch is given the task of defending Tom Robinson, an African-American unjustly accused of raping a white woman. From that moment on, the family's reputation changes radically, and for the first time, Jen and Scout are faced with racism and discrimination. No one in the city understands how Atticus could have accepted such a case, and no one understands how a white man could consider a black man as his peer. Nigger lover. That's what the lawyer becomes to the eyes of the rest of his fellow citizens, a traitor of the society. However, Atticus doesn't give up and is increasingly convinced to defend Tom. But the words of a black man have no value compared to those of a white man, and poor Tom is eventually condemned. During the events, Scout finally begins to understand the world that surrounds her and realizes the value of her father's teachings. Hate spreads among the inhabitants of Macomb, and at the end of the story, while the two brothers are heading home from the city theater, Jem hears a strange noise behind them. Suddenly, someone rushes over them and pushes them violently to the ground. It seems that the children have no way out, but the intervention of Boo turns the situation around. The attacker is found on the ground with a knife into his chest. You would probably expect an arrest, but the sheriff has a different interpretation of the facts. A After all, it would be cruel to put such a shy man in the spotlight. It would be sort of like shooting a mockingbird. The novel described the life in America of the 30s, yet the themes covered couldn't be more contemporary. Racism is certainly at the heart of the whole story, but more emerges from these pages. The book transports us into the past, also allowing us to reflect on the present and on important aspects of the human soul. The fear of the unknown, the distrust towards what's different, prejudice and discrimination. The themes are extremely complex, but the events are presented to us through the eyes of a girl, a pure and innocent child whose mind hasn't been distorted by hatred and fear. That's why this novel is so extraordinary. The author tries to make the reader understand that if children aren't influenced by their parents' prejudices, then they have a more complete perception of the world. Gem and Scout don't think that blacks are inferior or worse than whites, because everybody is the same to them. They are all people. At first glance, Scout's questions may seem trivial, but it's precisely because of their ingenuity that we see how senseless racial segregation is. Tom Robinson isn't the only different that appears in the novel. Boo Radley is also considered different because he doesn't have the same mental faculties as the others. He never shows up around and people don't know him. However, in everyone's eyes, he is a monster, a dangerous man to stay away from. The children at the beginning, listening to the rumors about him, are afraid of him, but at the end of the story, they get to discover his human dimension and change their mind. To Kill a Mockingbird is also a story full of courage, honesty, determination and hope, all things that are embodied in the figure of Atticus Finch, a wonderful character who seeks justice for all and who places his moral values above his reputation and that of his family. He is a patient and loving father who, despite his commitments, always finds time to answer his children's questions and give them advice, always leaving them the freedom to draw their own conclusion. Atticus, who in the film is wonderfully played by Gregory VII, is a very good man who has great expectation of himself and of the world around him. A man who is understanding even when these expectations aren't met, and who in spite of everything continues to trust the human soul. He is a man who doesn't know the word revenge, and who teaches his children values such as respect, impartiality, honesty, and the importance of doing what is right at all costs. This novel is an important book that deserves to be read because it contains precious teachings of life that we should all treasure. In addition to racism, tolerance, and social division, concepts on which the entire story is based, a strong emphasis is finally given to moral steadfastness, and therefore to the courage to listen to your own conscience and to pursue your own convictions, even if this involves going against the tide. An important teaching that, especially in our time, shouldn't be forgotten.